Linux has always been the operating system people respect, but hesitate to fully embrace, the one praised for its power, freedom, and flexibility, yet often left behind when it comes to everyday usability for the average person. And for decades, the biggest problem holding Linux back wasn't performance, security, or even software availability. It was something far more human, far more subtle, and far more difficult to fix. And that problem was fragmentation, inconsistency, and the lack of a truly unified, polished user experience that could compete head-to-head with Windows and Mac OS without requiring users to relearn everything they thought they knew about computing. But now in 2026, something has fundamentally changed. Something that many people once thought was impossible has actually started to take shape. And for the first time in its history, Linux is not just catching up. It's redefining what a modern desktop operating system can be. For years, Linux users lived in a world of choices, hundreds of distributions, dozens of desktop environments, multiple packaging systems, and endless customization options. And while that sounds like a dream for power users, it became a nightmare for newcomers, because instead of a clear path, they were faced with questions like, which distro should I use? Which desktop environment is best? How do I install software? Why doesn't this app work on my system? And why does everything feel slightly different from what I expected? And that confusion created friction. And that friction kept Linux from reaching the mainstream audience it deserved, because no matter how powerful something is, if it's not easy to use, people will simply choose something else. But in 2026, Linux has finally tackled this problem head-on, not by eliminating choice, but by building a layer of consistency on top of that choice. And the breakthrough comes from a combination of technologies, collaboration between major projects, and a shift in mindset across the Linux ecosystem. And at the center of this transformation is the idea that users shouldn't have to care about the underlying complexity of the system. They should just be able to install apps, use their computer, and get work done without friction, without confusion, and without compromise. One of the biggest pieces of this puzzle has been the maturation of universal packaging formats like Flatpak, which have evolved far beyond their early limitations and have now become the standard way of distributing desktop applications across Linux. And what makes this so important is not just convenience, but reliability. Because for the first time, developers can build an application once and know that it will run consistently across nearly every Linux distribution, without worrying about dependency issues or compatibility problems. And for users, this means something incredibly simple yet incredibly powerful. You click install and the app just works. No terminal commands, no troubleshooting, no frustration. At the same time, the integration between these packaging systems and desktop environments has reached a level that feels seamless, where app stores are fast, intuitive, and visually polished, where updates happen in the background without breaking your system, and where sandboxing provides security without getting in your way. And this is something that used to be a major weakness for Linux, but now it has become one of its greatest strengths. Because not only is software easier to install, it's also safer and more controlled than ever before. Another major breakthrough has been in hardware support, which has historically been one of Linux's biggest pain points, especially for laptops, GPUs, and specialized devices. But in recent years, hardware vendors have started taking Linux seriously, not just as an afterthought, but as a first-class platform. And this shift has led to better drivers, better firmware support, and better out-of-the-box compatibility. And in 2026, this effort has reached a tipping point where most modern hardware works flawlessly with Linux from the moment you boot it up, including features like power management, high refresh displays, fingerprint sensors, and even advanced GPU capabilities. What's even more important is that this hardware support is no longer fragmented across different distributions, because there is now a stronger alignment around common standards, common kernels, and shared technologies, which means that improvements made in one part of the ecosystem benefit everyone. And this kind of collaboration has helped eliminate one of the biggest sources of inconsistency that used to plague Linux users. But perhaps the most noticeable change for everyday users is the evolution of the Linux desktop itself, where environments like GNOME, KDE Plasma, and others have undergone significant redesigns to focus on simplicity, performance, and visual consistency. And instead of trying to mimic other operating systems or overwhelm users with options, they now prioritize clarity, smooth animations, and intuitive workflows. And the result is an experience that feels modern, cohesive, and surprisingly refined. In 2026, the Linux desktop no longer feels like a collection of separate components stitched together. It feels like a complete operating system with a clear identity, where settings are organized logically, notifications are consistent, and applications follow unified design guidelines. And this might not sound revolutionary on the surface, but for Linux it represents a massive shift from the past, where inconsistency was the norm and polish was often an afterthought. Another key factor in solving Linux's biggest problem has been the rise of immutable operating systems, which have introduced a new approach to system design that prioritizes stability and reliability. And instead of allowing the core system to be modified directly, these systems keep it locked and read-only, while applications and user data are handled separately. And this means that updates are safer, rollbacks are easier, and the risk of breaking your system is dramatically reduced. And for users, this creates a sense of confidence that simply didn't exist before. This approach also aligns perfectly with modern software distribution methods, where applications are containerized and isolated from the base system, and together these technologies create an environment where everything just works. Updates don't cause unexpected issues, and users can focus on their tasks instead of worrying about system maintenance. And this is a huge step forward for Linux as a mainstream platform. At the same time, gaming on Linux has undergone a revolution of its own, driven by advancements in compatibility layers, performance optimizations, and support from major companies. And what was once considered impossible is now a reality where thousands of games run smoothly on Linux, often with performance comparable to or even better than other operating systems. And this has removed another major barrier that kept many users from making the switch. The impact of this change goes beyond just gaming, because it signals a broader shift in how Linux is perceived, from a niche platform for developers and enthusiasts to a viable option for everyday users, students, professionals, and even content creators. And as more people start using Linux, the ecosystem continues to grow stronger, creating a positive feedback loop that drives further improvements and innovation. Another important piece of the puzzle is the role of major organizations and companies that have started investing more heavily in Linux desktop development, contributing resources, funding, and engineering talent to projects that were once maintained primarily by volunteers. And this collaboration has accelerated progress in ways that would have been unimaginable just a few years ago, leading to faster development cycles, better quality control, and more ambitious goals. What makes this moment truly significant is not just the individual improvements, but how they all come together to create a cohesive experience. Because for the first time, Linux feels like it has a clear direction, a shared vision that prioritizes usability, consistency, and accessibility, without sacrificing the freedom and flexibility that make it unique. And this balance is what finally solves the biggest problem Linux has faced for decades. Of course, Linux is still Linux. It still offers customization, control, and the ability to shape your system exactly the way you want. But now those features are built on top of a solid, user-friendly foundation instead of replacing it. And this means that beginners can start with a simple, polished experience, while advanced users can still dive deeper and customize everything to their liking. And this duality is one of Linux's greatest strengths. In 2026, switching to Linux no longer feels like taking a risk. It feels like making a smart choice because you're getting an operating system that is fast, secure, and increasingly easy to use, with access to a growing library of applications, excellent hardware support, and a community that is more welcoming and organized than ever before. And this combination makes Linux more appealing than it has ever been. The timing of this transformation is also important because the broader tech landscape is changing in ways that favor Linux, with increasing concerns about privacy, control, and vendor lock-in, pushing more users to look for alternatives. And Linux offers a compelling answer to these concerns by giving users full control over their system without sacrificing modern features or convenience. At the same time, the rise of cloud computing, web applications, and cross-platform tools has reduced the reliance on any single operating system, making it easier for users to switch without losing access to the software they need. And this shift has removed another barrier that once held Linux back, opening the door for a much wider audience. Looking ahead, the implications of this change are enormous, because as Linux continues to improve and gain adoption, it has the potential to reshape the entire desktop computing landscape, introducing more competition, more innovation, and more choice for users. And this could lead to a future where Linux is not just an alternative, but a mainstream option that stands alongside other major operating systems as an equal. And perhaps the most exciting part is that this is just the beginning. Because the momentum behind Linux in 2026 is stronger than ever, with ongoing developments in areas like AI integration, performance optimization, and user experience design promising to push the platform even further. And as these improvements continue to build on the foundation that has finally addressed its biggest weakness, the possibilities for Linux are virtually limitless. So when we say that Linux has solved its biggest problem, we're not talking about a single feature or a single update. We're talking about a fundamental shift in how the entire ecosystem works, a shift that transforms Linux from a powerful but fragmented platform into a cohesive, user-friendly operating system that can compete with the best in the world. And that is why this moment matters, because it changes everything not just for Linux, but for the future of computing as a whole.